You know, back in the day, Quentin Willson was a half-decent motoring journalist. As part of the original Top Gear team in the 90s with Jeremy Clarkson, and later on Fifth Gear, Channel 5's alternative motor show, he was a familiar face on British TV, and I have to say I quite enjoyed his style. But instead of going quietly into retirement and without the charisma of Clarkson, he now pops up everywhere, relentlessly plugging EVs and net zero at every opportunity, having founded what is essentially a pro-EV propaganda organisation known as Fair Charge, which aims to bust all the myths about EVs. The organisation is supported by the European Climate Foundation, a climate action organisation, which I think speaks volumes in itself. And when people have the temerity not to think the way they are being told to think by the government, like at the moment with EVs, the only answer they have is misinformation. They tried this argument when the Indigenous voice to Parliament in Australia was tanking in the polls, claiming that anyone who dared to question it was either racist or stupid, or both, and after the vote, the only reason it lost was because of misinformation. Now we have a country even more divided than before. Bravo. One thing we can be sure of, however, is if you have to wheel out the misinformation line, you've pretty much lost the argument already. Welcome back to MGUY, British engineer and lawyer, now Sydney-based YouTuber. Be sure to follow me on the usual socials for more content, links in the description, and please make sure you subscribed and have enabled all notifications so you don't miss out on any future videos. The misinformation argument goes like this. We, the governing elite, think that you, the unwashed masses, are too stupid to decide for yourselves the merits and drawbacks of a particular subject. So we need to curate the message that you receive very carefully by shutting down arguments we don't like and which we are going to label myths and misinformation. This argument is currently being used against EV skeptics who, rather than genuinely having concerns about the EV and net zero transition, are just low-information bogans who need to be sent to re-education camps. Wilson sadly has formed for this in the recent past, going on BBC Radio, link in the description, to call people who have doubts about EVs nut jobs on YouTube, in a thinly veiled attack on Lee, the Macmaster, whose Porsche Taycan has depreciated faster than a piano down a flight of stairs, and who has, quite rightly I think, made many videos warning people against making the same mistake and losing tens of thousands of pounds buying an electric car. And now he's trotting out the same old tired arguments at the Transport Select Committee hearings of the UK Parliament.
And I think we need to look at giving consumers a reason to buy these cars. We need to make sure that they're aware of the total cost of ownership, which is significantly less than combustion cars. We should be looking at inexpensive incentives like free parking, as they've done in Norway, use of bus lanes, things like this, stuff you can't buy. But it's the misinformation which is really putting people off, who aren't even considering buying an electric car. They're not even inquiring about price because they read this torrent of stuff from right-wing and vested interests. I see you nodding there, Fabian. So that would be a really important policy lever that we need to do. DFT, we've been talking to them about myth busting. We've published this book, The Little Book of EV Myths, to make sure that consumers are made aware that these cars are reliable, they don't catch fire, the batteries don't fail, they work, people are driving them happily.
So what we need to force all you ungrateful plebs into buying these wonderful electric marvels is more incentives, more government money, more sweeteners and less misinformation. We can't possibly just let the market decide because we have so much vested interests in EVs being the next big thing, and the climate movement has just too much momentum at this point. We have to put our thumb on the scale and tip it in our favour. The argument for an EV just doesn't stack up right now and probably won't for decades. People can see this with their own eyes. New prices of EVs are discounted heavily because they won't sell, the used market is non-existent, an EV cannot do the job of a regular ICE car. It's less convenient, less practical and still way more expensive, despite all the myth-busting that the book tries to do. I'll leave it to you to go through that and point out the obvious flaws in the comments, which I will look forward to reading. Ironically, in many ways, that book is just as much misinformation as the stuff he's complaining about. It's just acceptable misinformation, sourced from the same establishment climate alarmist organisations who are pushing net zero globally, like the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It's only misinformation when they don't agree with it. If you need a palate cleanser after that video, and I for one certainly did, I suggest you head over to the Daily Skeptic, where Ben Pyle does the required evisceration in an article entitled "I wouldn't buy a second-hand car from Quentin Willson, let alone a transport policy." On Twitter, climate skeptics were quick to observe that the same organisation that funds virtually every think tank promoting net zero coincidentally also fund Wilson's pro-EV outfit. Practically every single green civil society organisation is funded by the European Climate Foundation, ECF. Even the think tank that produced Rishi Sunak's election-saving miracle policy of compulsory national service, Onward, is ECF funded. From XR, Extinction Rebellion, through every Labour, Lib Dem, Conservative-aligned think tank, trade unions and university research organisations, the ECF pump tens of millions each year into seemingly independent organisations to align commentary on the net zero agenda as a condition of funding. It's the same funding that enabled UK 100 to lobby for low-traffic neighbourhoods and clean air zones throughout the country. It's the same funding that supports the Conservative Environment Network caucus of MPs, of which Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero, Claire Coutinho, is a member. And it's the same ECF that funds the Carbon Brief outfit that produces the ridiculous "wind power is 9 times cheaper than gas" fib that still animates Westminster net zero narratives. Misinformation is the blob's vernacular for the unauthorised views on debates that occur outside of that sphere. The concept has been developed by the blob to protect itself from democracy, debate and criticism. When the green blob pumps out dubious claims about the benefits of net zero, it's called campaigning. And when it's the other lot, it's misinformation. Go and read the whole thing, link in the description. I'll leave the last word to Jeff from Jeff Buys Cars, who responded to Wilson's tweet on the hearing with this: "No, it's because they are shit, overpriced, they depreciate at an alarming rate, they don't have enough range, they're unreliable, they can't be recycled, the batteries cost more than the cars, and we don't want them. Oh, and all you pro-EV shills are paid stooges." But as I said before, one thing we can be pleased about is that the misinformation line is only pulled out when the argument is lost. And for that, we should definitely be thankful.